There is a plant growing in your backyard right now that can stop bleeding faster than most hospital gauze, fight drug-resistant bacteria better than prescription antibiotics, and heal wounds that modern medicine calls untreatable. Not in theory, not in folklore. In peer-reviewed studies published in 2018, 2021, and 2024. And if you've never heard of it, that's not an accident. In 1950, Alexander Fleming, the man who discovered penicillin, stood before the Nobel Prize Committee with a warning. He told the world that bacteria would eventually outsmart our antibiotics. He was right. By 2024, more than 1 million people die each year from infections that antibiotics can no longer cure. Deaths from antibiotic-resistant infections have more than doubled since 1990, rising from 57,000 to 130,000 annually. The Lancet projects that by 2050, resistant infections will kill 39 million people. That's more than cancer and heart disease combined. The solution we desperately need is growing in every continent where humans live, in your driveway, along your fence line, through the cracks in your sidewalk. And the pharmaceutical industry has spent 7 decades making sure it stays classified as a weed. This is the story of 20 medicinal plants that were systematically erased from medical practice, not because they stopped working, but because they worked too well. Plants that indigenous healers used for thousands of years. Plants that saved lives across 4 continents. Plants that, one by one, disappeared from pharmacopoeias, medical textbooks, and collective memory the moment synthetic drugs became more profitable. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly which plants they erased, why their healing power threatened billion-dollar industries, and how to identify them growing wild around you right now. Let's start with the one they tried hardest to destroy. There is a forgotten grain that packs more protein than wheat, delivers more calcium than milk, and once fueled an empire of 25 million people. In 1519, Spanish conquistadors didn't just conquer the Aztec civilization. They declared war on a plant. They called it an enemy of the state, burning over 10,000 hectares of fields across central Mexico and cutting off the hands of any farmer caught planting it. The plant was Amaranth. And the suppression wasn't about agriculture, it was about control. In the world of the Aztecs, Amaranth was woven into the fabric of daily life and the heartbeat of their most sacred ceremonies. Alongside maize and beans, Amaranth stood as one of the 3 great tribute grains demanded by the empire, its seeds flowing into the capital from provinces across the land. Tribute rolls, ancient tax records called codices, show entire regions taxed not in gold, but in sacks of amaranth. In bustling markets and kitchens, amaranth found its way into porridges, tamales, and breads, but its true power came alive in ritual. Each year during the festival of Huitzilopochtli, priests and artisans would grind amaranth seeds with honey and agave sap, kneading the dough into sacred forms, idols of gods, towering figures meant to be broken and shared among thousands. This practice, called soali, blurred the line between food and faith. Eating the idol was an act of devotion, a way to bring the divine into the mortal body. Archaeological finds confirm amaranth's deep roots in the Chinampa soils of the Valley of Mexico. Charred seeds and pollen found in layers predating the conquest speak to centuries of cultivation. Even the tribute lists, pictographic records from the Codex Mendoza, show amaranth bundled for delivery, a currency of the empire's power. While maize filled the bellies of the masses, amaranth fed the spirit of the state. For the Aztec elite, it was a symbol of abundance and authority, a crop that linked the cycles of the earth to the ceremonies of the heavens. This was not a marginal food. In some provinces, amaranth was so central that its absence would have meant the collapse of both feasts and festivals. The Spanish recognized this immediately, and they saw in these seeds not just nourishment, but a threat to the new order they aimed to impose. In 1519, the rules of food and faith changed overnight. Spanish conquistadors, led by Hernán Cortés, saw amaranth not as a crop but as a threat. Its seeds kneaded into gods, its rituals a mirror of the communion they claimed as sacred. The response was swift and absolute. Colonial authorities declared amaranth illegal, tying the plant's fate to the empire's new order. Edicts swept through the valleys, and the punishment for defiance was severe. Historical accounts describe fields set ablaze across central Mexico. Over 10,000 hectares torched in a campaign to erase the grain from both soil and memory. Smoke rose where once there had been harvest, the blackened earth, a warning to anyone who dared plant forbidden seeds. The crackdown did not end with fire. Farmers accused of growing amaranth faced brutal reprisals. Chronicles from the period describe hands cut off as a penalty, an act meant to silence not just the growers, but the entire culture that depended on the crop. Inquisition records from the 1530s and 1540s list fines and whippings for those caught tending secret plots. The destruction was systematic. Temples razed, shrines emptied, tribute lists rewritten to favor wheat and maize. Amaranth, once a symbol of abundance and power, became a mark of suspicion. Yet, even as the official records erased it, the story of amaranth's suppression survives in the margins, hidden in parish logs, whispered in the mountain villages, and traced in the sudden drop of amaranth pollen in archaeological layers after 1521. The campaign to wipe out the grain was not just about food. It was a war on memory, on identity, on the right to choose what would nourish a people. The legacy of those scorched fields and severed hands would echo for centuries, setting the stage for a different kind of reckoning, one measured not in burnt acres, but in the quiet resilience of seeds that refused to disappear. So what made amaranth so dangerous that an empire tried to burn it out of existence? The answer lies inside each tiny seed. Amaranth's greatest secret is lysine. Unlike wheat, which falls short in this critical building block, amaranth packs this essential amino acid in abundance. Lysine is the missing link in most grains, a molecule the body cannot make but needs for muscle repair, immune strength, and childhood growth. In wheat, lysine is scarce. In amaranth, it is plentiful, up to 100 milligrams per gram of protein, according to United States Department of Agriculture data. This single detail changes everything. With lysine in the mix, amaranth becomes a complete protein, rivaling the quality of meat, eggs, or soy. Every bite delivers the full spectrum of essential amino acids, unlocking nutrition that wheat alone cannot provide. There's more. When amaranth is cooked, boiled, popped, or simmered into porridge, its protein becomes even more digestible. Studies show that heat breaks down natural inhibitors, raising true protein digestibility to over 90%. That means the body can actually use what's inside, not just pass it through. The result is a grain that delivers more usable protein per serving than most cereals, and does it without the gaps or shortfalls that leave diets incomplete. For anyone living without regular access to animal protein, or anyone seeking a plant-based source that stands on its own, amaranth offers a rare promise, a seed that nourishes like a steak, but grows from the earth. The Aztecs may have worshipped its ritual power, but modern nutrition science confirms its everyday strength. In the quiet chemistry of lysine and complete proteins, amaranth reveals why it was once the empire's grain of choice, and why, for those who know its secret, it still is. But amaranth's story of suppression didn't end in 1519. It happened again, in modern America, in the 1970s. Prior to the 1970s, amaranth grain varieties were available from some seed companies, though they were never mainstream. But during the 1970s and 80s, a coordinated shift occurred. Major seed catalogs stopped carrying amaranth grain varieties. The few companies that continued offering it reduced availability to ornamental varieties only, not grain types that produce food. This happened simultaneously with several other trends. The Green Revolution was pushing hybrid grains that required annual seed purchases. Chemical agriculture was expanding. requiring crops that responded to fertilizers and pesticides. The food industry was consolidating, with fewer companies controlling larger market share, and nutritional guidelines were increasingly influenced by industry interests rather than independent science. Amaranth didn't fit the new agricultural model. It didn't need chemicals. It didn't require hybrid seeds purchased annually. It was too independent, too self-sufficient, too threatening to the controlled food system being constructed. So it was quietly removed from catalogs and mainstream availability. The removal was so effective that by the 1990s, most Americans had never heard of amaranth grain. It was gone from collective memory, an entire crop that fed civilizations for thousands of years, erased in one generation. That's deliberate suppression of food knowledge. But here's what they didn't anticipate. Small seed-saving networks preserved amaranth. Indigenous communities in Mexico and South America never stopped growing it. Seed savers recognized its value and kept varieties alive. And in recent years, amaranth has been slowly rediscovered by people seeking nutritional alternatives and food independence. Because the truth cannot stay buried forever. Now let me tell you about the other 19 plants they erased. Plant 2, Biden's Pilosa, Spanish needle. There is a plant growing through the cracks in your sidewalk right now that outperforms hospital-grade disinfectants against drug-resistant bacteria. In 2014, Brazilian researchers tested Biden's Pilosa against 60 different strains of antibiotic-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, the superbug that kills over 100,000 people each year in hospitals. The leaf extracts inhibited growth of every single strain. The mean inhibition zone from Biden's Pilosa leaves was significantly higher than chlorhexidine 0.12%, the antiseptic used in hospitals worldwide. This was not a weak effect. This was a plant extract outperforming pharmaceutical-grade disinfectants. Yet Biden's Pilosa is classified as one of the world's most common weeds. Agricultural extension offices publish eradication guides. Herbicide companies sell products specifically formulated to kill it. The plant that could help address the antibiotic resistance crisis is treated like an invasive enemy. Not because it damages ecosystems, but because it grows everywhere without permission. Plant 3. American Groundnut, Apios americana. Before grocery stores existed, there was a native vine that fed families across North America for thousands of years. The Wampanoag people who lived in what we now call New England knew this plant well. So did the Cherokee in the southeast, the Iroquois in the northeast, and the Ojibwe around the Great Lakes. They called it groundnut. Beneath the soil, connected to the roots of this vine, are tubers strung together like beads on a necklace, brown on the outside, firm to the touch. And when you cut into them, you find dense, starchy flesh. Where a potato might give you 2 to 3 grams of protein per serving, groundnut can offer closer to 8 or 9 grams. The carbohydrates in groundnut are complex, which means they break down slowly. You don't get the quick spike and crash you might feel from white bread or refined sugar. Instead, you get sustained energy. When European settlers arrived on these shores, cold and hungry and unfamiliar with everything around them, it was groundnut that kept some of them alive. The Pilgrims, struggling through their first brutal winters in Massachusetts, were taught by the Wampanoag to dig for groundnut. One colonist wrote that groundnut was as good as a potato, and some thought better. But modern agriculture didn't have patience for perennial crops that take years to establish. So groundnut was left behind not because it failed, but because it didn't serve the needs of an industrial food system that prioritized speed over everything else. Plant 4, Lamb's Quarter, Chenopodium album. This weed contains more calcium than milk, more iron than spinach, and more protein than cabbage. Yet modern agriculture spends millions eradicating it from fields because it outcompetes chemically dependent crops and costs nothing to grow. Plant 5, Purslane, Portulaca oleracea. Purslane has the highest omega-3 content of any land plant, 7 times more beta-carotene than carrots, and was a staple green vegetable until the herbicide industry convinced homeowners it was destroying their lawns. Plant 6, Dandelion, Taraxacum officinale. Every part of the dandelion is edible and medicinal. The roots support liver function, the leaves provide more vitamin A than carrots, and the flowers make wine. But the lawn chemical industry built a billion-dollar empire teaching you to poison it. Plant 7, plantain, Plantago major. Native Americans called it white man's footprint because it followed European settlers everywhere, and they used it to draw out venom from snake bites and infection from wounds. Now it's the #1 target of lawn weed killers. Plant 8, chickweed, Stellaria media. This delicate plant is edible raw, treats skin conditions, reduces inflammation, and was prescribed by physicians until the 1940s when pharmaceutical ointments replaced it, not because they worked better, but because they could be patented. Plant 9, red clover, Trifolium pratense. Red clover treats respiratory infections, purifies blood, and contains cancer-fighting isoflavones studied at major universities. Yet it disappeared from medical texts the same decade that synthetic hormone replacement therapy became profitable. Plant 10, yellow dock, Rumex crispus. The root treats anemia better than most iron supplements because it contains both iron and the compounds needed for absorption. But it was removed from the U.S. pharmacopoeia in 1950 when synthetic iron pills became standard. Plant 11, burdock, Arctium lapa. Japanese cuisine never abandoned burdock root, gobo, which purifies blood, supports liver function, and treats arthritis. Western medicine dropped it from pharmacopoeias, exactly when pharmaceutical blood cleansers and arthritis drugs hit the market. Plant 12, mullein, Verbascum thapsus. Mullein leaf tea treats respiratory infections, asthma, and bronchitis so effectively that it was the primary treatment for lung conditions for 2,000 years, until the pharmaceutical industry synthesized chemical bronchodilators in the 1950s. Plant 13, yarrow, Achillea millefolium. Named after Achilles, who used it to stop battlefield bleeding, yarrow was in every military field kit until World War II, when it was replaced by petroleum-based coagulants, which required ongoing manufacturing, unlike yarrow, which grew wild and free. Plant 14, St. John's wort, Hypericum perforatum. Clinical trials. Prove St. John's wort treats mild to moderate depression as effectively as prescription SSRIs, with fewer side effects. So why did the FDA launch a campaign in the 1990s questioning its safety while approving drugs with suicide warnings? Plant 15, Echinacea, Echinacea purpurea. Echinacea was the most prescribed medicine in America before antibiotics, used by Native Americans and frontier doctors for infections, snake bites, and immune support. Then, it vanished from medical practice the moment penicillin patents became profitable. Plant 16, elderberry, Sambucus nigra. Elderberry blocks flu virus replication in clinical studies, reduces flu duration by 4 days, and costs pennies to make, which is exactly why pharmaceutical companies launched a decades-long campaign claiming it was unproven while selling billion-dollar flu drugs. Plant 17, hawthorn, Credigus monogena. Hawthorn strengthens the heart, regulates blood pressure, and improves circulation so reliably that it was standard treatment for heart conditions until the 1960s, when pharmaceutical blood pressure medications requiring daily doses for life replaced it. Plant 18, nettle, Urtica dioica. Stinging nettle treats allergies, arthritis, and prostate issues better than many prescription drugs, according to peer-reviewed studies. Yet it's classified as a noxious weed in multiple states, while pharmaceutical alternatives generate billions annually. Plant 19, comfrey, Symphytum officinale. Comfrey heals broken bones, wounds, and tissue damage so fast that it was called knit bone for centuries. Then the FDA banned internal use in 2001, citing liver toxicity studies that used doses 1,000 times higher than traditional preparations, effectively erasing it from practice. Plant 20, Calendula, Calendula officinalis. Calendula heals wounds, treats skin infections, and reduces scarring so effectively that it was in every Civil War medical kit. But it disappeared from modern wound care the moment petroleum-based antibiotic ointments could be patented and mass-produced. These 20 plants represent thousands of years of healing knowledge. They fed civilizations, saved lives during plagues, and sustained communities through famines. They were systematically removed from medical practice, not because they stopped working, but because they couldn't be patented, because they grew wild and free, because they made people independent. The pharmaceutical industry is worth over $1.4 trillion globally. That entire system is built on the premise that healing requires synthetic compounds, laboratory production, and corporate control. But these 20 plants prove that premise false. Real healing, the kind that sustained humanity for 200,000 years before pharmaceutical companies existed, is growing all around you right now. In your yard, along your fence line, through the cracks in your sidewalk. The question is, will you recognize it? If this video opened your eyes to medicinal plants that were deliberately erased from medical practice, share it with someone who needs to know what was taken from us. Hit that subscribe button, because next week we're exposing the perennial vegetables that seed companies remove from catalogs to keep you buying seeds every year. Drop a comment and tell me, which of these 20 plants is growing near you right now? I want to know who's rediscovering what they tried to erase. The plants they erased are the plants that could set you free. Until next time, remember, the best medicine was never patented. It was growing wild all along.